Okay.
Hi, this is Greg Study on Soccer, and I am here with Christian Filimon. It is a joy to hang out with you today. We're gonna take. I mean, anybody that watches Study on Soccer kind of knows the direction I go. I tend to sort of want to get to know my guest and get to know and have you guys get to know the guest. And so we're going to talk to Philly about where he's at, what he's doing, and how he got there. And then also we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that have gone on and are going on recently in his neck of the woods up in the Inland Empire. So welcome, Philly. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure hanging out with you, Greg. It's funny. I was doing some like digging within YouTube, just trying to find a specific clip from a specific game that we called earlier this year, and I came across our very, very first interview back when I had the little man bun and all that other stuff. It's crazy that was about, going on 4 years ago that we first met, and here we are, a couple months away from the start of another MASL season and 4 years worth of friendship. Wild how time flies.
And we've had some really good times. Got together a couple of fun times together that really have been fun. I think the Julie V afternoon thing was pretty cool. Obviously the LAFC game a couple of weeks ago, that was super cool. But where I want to start with is I'm a West Coast guy. Now I've traveled all over the world, and I've done a lot of traveling, and I've been to New York. In fact, I had my first real experience with New York City was flying in and flying right past the Statue of Liberty and looking at the Empire State Building from the air and all that kind of thing. It was an interesting day. It was the day that they unveiled the Statue of Liberty in 1986. And so they had the boats, the tall boats were on the water. The boats were everywhere. It would look like you could walk across the water from boat to boat. And so that was my first experience with New York City. But what I wanted to ask you as a New Yorker is because I know enough to know that you're not just a New Yorker, man. I mean, you're from Queens, or you're from the Bronx, or you're from Manhattan. And I'd like to know what part of New York are you from? And a couple more questions after you get to that one.
Yeah, I mean, people in New York are very territorial. New Yorkers don't consider anything outside of the 5 boroughs New York. And then obviously the city people have their stigma against the Long Island people. And then the city people also have their stigma against the people that are north of Westchester County. So it's funny how territorial we all can be. But to answer your question, I was born in Manhattan at a hospital right near Columbia University. But for the most part, I was raised in Forest Hills, Queens, very close to where they used to play the U.S. Open back before they moved into Flushing. It was that very neighborhood, Forest Hills Gardens, that I grew up in. My family immigrated there back in the 70s and in some cases the late 60s. I had a portion of my family move over to Munich, Germany. That was on my dad's side. On my mom's side, they all came through Queens, through my aunt's house, who was based in Jamaica, Queens. And my yaya, Olga Panos, she was very much responsible for bringing a lot of my family over from Greece and Romania to the United States. So all my cousins, everybody that live in the U.S., in some way, shape, or form, regardless of where they branched out, they came through Jamaica, Queens. And so I spent most of my life growing up in Forest Hills. High school, though, my dad was in finance, so I ended up leaving halfway through 8th grade. And I spent 8th grade, the rest of 8th grade, and all of high school in Frankfurt, Germany. So I did some time there. I moved back to the U.S. for a little bit, back to Queens, where my parents still maintained their house. And then I went off to Indiana University for college. I graduated in 3 years, moved back to Manhattan, and then spent most of my adult life living on the Upper East Side prior to buying a condo in Jersey City, which I ended up selling and moving out to California just a few years ago.
All right. Well, that was very, very full and quick. And in a nutshell, what got you here? I'm going to back you up a little bit, though. One of the things that has always kind of interested me is how does a guy a sports fan growing up in New York find his allegiance towards one baseball team while absolutely despising the other? I mean, if you're a Mets fan, you hate the Yankees, and if you're a Yankees fan, you hate the Mets. And I guess it's true with football too, right? I mean, the Giants and the Jets have a similar kind of a thing. How does that happen in the culture of New York?
A lot of it has to deal with what neighborhood you're from. And honestly, in some cases, who's the team at the time. So I grew up in Queens in the 80s. I was 6 years old when the Mets won the World Series. So that was my first love in this world, was baseball, the New York Mets, and in particular, Gary Carter. My father took me to a game when I was right about that age, and I fell in love with the whole spectacle and the pageantry of it. And I'll never forget, the Mets were playing the Pirates, and Gary Carter hits a walk-off home run in the bottom of the 10th inning to win the game for the Mets. For me, it was love at first sight. They won the World Series. They captured the heart of the city. Obviously, as you grow older, you start to realize that, well, cocaine is really what fueled that team, and they could have been a much better, bigger dynasty had they not gotten involved with that and amphetamines and all that other stuff. But to answer your question, long story long, the Mets were the team in New York in the 80s. I mean, you grew up in Queens, and we were about a 10, 15-minute car ride from Shea. We were all Mets fans. If you rocked the Yankee cap in my neck of the woods in Forest Hills, you got clowned on, or in some cases beat up. So that's where the Mets fandom came in. And for reasons unbeknownst to me, I never quite understood why it happened. By no means is it the rhyming scheme. Most Mets fans become Jets fans. And a lot of that allegiance really stems from the fact that the Jets played at Shea initially before they moved over to New Jersey. The Giants, they played at Yankee Stadium. So essentially you were sort of indoctrinated to those teams that way. So you had the Mets and the Jets. The Knicks were my team. That was the only basketball team. New Jersey might as well have been another country. We didn't factor anything in New Jersey into any of our lives or equations. And for the most part, everybody in my neighborhood was a Rangers fan. And I too grew up a Rangers fan. It wasn't until the market started crashing in New York in 2008 to where I switched my allegiances to the Islanders, who are now one of my favorite teams, period. And not because they were succeeding. A lot of the reason was based on principle. As everybody was losing their jobs in finance in New York City, getting a ticket to Madison Square Garden became exponentially difficult. So the cost to sit basically on the roof of Madison Square Garden was the same cost it was to sit basically behind the Islanders bench. So at that point, with the way Dolan was running the program at Madison Square Garden, I just wanted to give a big F you to him. And what the Rangers kept doing, I just didn't like it. So I switched my allegiances very fervently and furiously. And since 2008, I've been gung-ho Islanders. Like, I got to the point of where I hate the Rangers. But it's very, very it's not very common to have a kid from the boroughs root for the Islanders. Obviously, I had the Rangers a hop, skip, and a jump from my house. Even though I was in Queens, you hop the Long Island Railroad, I'm at Penn Station in 14 minutes. It's easy to go to a Ranger game. But at that time, it's a matter of principle. So that's sort of how the allegiance essentially was, and why I love the teams that I do.
That's interesting. I told you a while back, I told you a story when I learned that you were a Mets fan. I mean, it was probably the day that I learned that you were a Mets fan. Back in, you're saying like 86 and whatnot, the middle and late 80s, during that time, I was working for the airlines and I was traveling all over the place. And what I would do when I was in a particular city is I would look up whatever sporting event was going on. If I was in Hartford, I would go to a Whalers game. If I was, if I was in New York, I would look for some kind of a sporting event. And occasionally, most of the time, I knew where I was going to be ahead of time so I could plan out the event. And I knew that the Dodgers were going to be playing in New York against the Mets while I was going to be there. So I went to the little print shop and I had a t-shirt made. It was a Dodger blue t-shirt with white lettering. And it said on the front, it said, "I hate." And on the back, it said, "NY teams." Okay. And I wore that to Shea Stadium.
It's very ballsy, Greg.
I didn't. Okay, bro, I had no idea at the time how ballsy that was, and now I'm in it. Right, I'm in the middle of the whole thing, and I swear to you, I probably would not have gotten out of there alive had the Mets not won that game 12-1.
They're We're passionate in New York, that's for sure. And the Mets and the Dodgers themselves have a history that's very intertwined. Obviously, they came from the Dodgers came from Brooklyn. We don't need to go into the history. O'Malley moved them. They played their 58th season in LA. A couple years after they won the World Series in 55. But what a lot of people don't know is the Mets, their logo and their colors stem from the National League teams that were there originally. So you've got the original New York Giants logo, which is that intertwined NY, and Dodger blue. So that's the reason why they have that. And here's a fun story that a lot of people also don't know. Real quick, I know this isn't a baseball podcast, but when O'Malley wanted to change the location of Ebbets Field, he wanted it on the corner of Atlantic and Flatbush in Brooklyn, which is a genius space, intersecting with all the major public transportation, close to the highway, so on and so forth. The city planner at the time wanted them to go to Queens, and they obviously weren't the Queens Mets. So they got a good deal. They moved to LA. The rest is history. But oddly enough, decades later, the plot of land that O'Malley wanted to put the new version of Ebbets Field is now the same ground that the Barclays Center now stands on, where the Nets play. So a professional sports forum, if you will, eventually found its way on there decades after O'Malley said, that's the spot we wanted.
Interesting. Okay,
and then the last thing, like the Dodgers, like my grandfather's buried in the same cemetery as Jackie. I grew up off the Jackie Robinson Expressway. There's still a lot of Brooklyn Dodgers lore within New York. But, to me, it's like if they would have never left New York, I would have never been a Yankee fan. So I probably would have rooted for Brooklyn. And, they left. And if they didn't leave, there would be no Mets. So hence the Mets fandom. It's a curse, Greg. It's an acronym that stands for my entire team sucks. It's brutal being a Mets fan, but it is what it is.
That's funny. Okay. All right. Shifting gears a little bit. I know a little bit about you, but I don't know all the details. I know that you're a musician. And I know that you've been part of a band a number of times and have played with, I don't know if it's been the same guys throughout the years or what, but talk a little bit. I mean, just a little bit. Let people know a little bit about the music aspect of what you've been doing and what your life is on that.
Yeah, I squeaked out a very, very meager existence of being a guitar player in a couple of rock and roll bands. I love music. I mean, I always have. No kid growing up ever thought that they wanted to, sit inside of a cubicle farm or an office wearing a suit and tie, staring at a screen and, doing TPS reports. I wanted to be either a pro athlete or a musician. Those are things that I was very passionate in. I taught myself how to play the guitar a little later in life. I didn't have it in my hand as a child. I obsessively learned it in my 20s to the point where within a year of picking it up, I'm playing all the Zeppelin songs you can think of. And I'm halfway through learning Eddie Van Halen's Eruption. That's how dedicated to the craft I was. I got in wanting to play in a band. And shortly after, like I really figured out how to play, I would start going to rehearsal spaces. I would start jamming out. I'd meet other like-minded people. And when I started a band, it was with a buddy of mine who I lived in the same building with in New York City. We just got together. We just came up with a couple of chords, started riffing, started writing some songs to it. We expanded, put a band together, and then we traveled around. We opened up for some bigger bands. There's albums out there that are still, on iTunes, and maybe a nickel here and there literally will come through based on streams. I could tell you we get a fair amount of streams in Japan. Not so much within the United States, but that's what I really wanted to do. And I dedicated myself so much to it. I mean, I was doing that up until I was 35. I'm 43 now. You can do the math yourself. But I mean, I don't think I made any more than anywhere like 12 to 18 grand within any given year playing in a band. I had a background in finance. I quit in 08, right before the markets crashed and Lehman and Bear and Bernie Madoff and all that other stuff happened. I went into my boss's office and I straight up told him, look, if I'm going to get buried or cremated in a suit, I don't want to live in one. And he's like, well, what are you going to do? I'm like, I'm going to go become famous and you're going to see me on TV and the radio. And he's like, all right, buddy, good luck. And so we did that. And, I can lay my hat on the fact that I opened up for bands like the Michael Graves rendition of the Misfits, played with some other pretty cool people. The guy who produced my first band's record, that guy won a Grammy, and he's played in very prominent rock bands that all of us would have heard of and at some point jammed out to. But I did that for a number of years, and I tell you, I wasn't making much money. I got back into finance. I remember I was at a punk rock show, a band called No Effects. And the guy that I was there with, a really good buddy of mine, he and I shared an office together at Smith Barney back before I quit the industry. And he's like, hey, why don't you come back and work with me? Like, how much money are you really making in a band? I get that you want to do this, but come with me. People like you. You're charismatic. You're trustworthy. Make a couple of bucks and you can do the band. And I thought, all right, I might as well make a couple of bucks because I'm living off of my girlfriend at the time in an apartment in New York City. I was contributing somewhat, but I guess you could say I was a leech to a certain extent. I'm not proud of that, but she believed in me. God bless her heart. She really did, because what we had going on was pretty strong, the band. But I ended up taking the job at a firm, small little firm. You might have heard it, called JP Morgan. And then, I was starting to make a couple of bucks there. And I was I was playing in finance throughout the market hours. I was playing night shows in New York City and the surrounding areas. But then it just became too much, Greg. I got tired of playing a gig on a Tuesday night, making a couple $100, getting home at 3, 4 in the morning, waking up at 7, getting to the office. It drained me and it wore me out. And eventually it got to the point where I couldn't deal with the different personalities. At one point, the lead singer in one of the bands I was in, he was very much into narcotics. Not talking drugs. We're talking like bad narcotics. I'm in a car with him driving to a gig in Jersey, thinking to myself, this guy's got all kinds of paraphernalia and stuff on him. He gets pulled over and I get arrested for guilt by association. That's going to ruin my career. And for what?
Absolutely.
To play a VFW in Secaucus? No way. So I played my last show, a December show in New York City, 2015, and I pretty much hung up the guitar. It was a good run, had a lot of fun, a lot of good stories. Still pick up a guitar every once in a while, but the dreams of being in the next Nirvana or bands like that, that's gone. But it was fun while it lasted.
So when you got to California, we haven't even mentioned Amanda. Where does she show up along the way?
Later on down the road. So I went to Indiana University for the number one reason your high school guidance counselor tells you not to choose a school. I followed a girl. Pissed off my old man. I got into yeah, we had this conversation. It pissed off my old man. I got into NYU and another good Ivy League school. Granted, he kind of, pulled some strings to get me in. It wasn't necessarily based on academic merits, but I'll be the first to tell you that. And I turned it down, which obviously pissed him off because he had to pull some strings. I went to IU for a girl, which we made it up until junior year. And then it sort of fizzled. But during that time, I was in a fraternity. And I met a guy by the name of Andrew Habbey, who I became very good friends with. Fast forward, I graduated in 2005. Fast forward 9 or so years. Andrew's getting married, and I'm in his wedding party, along with his sister, Amanda. Never met Amanda. We'd only heard about Andrew's really hot sister, but while we were drinking beer and doing what fraternity guys do in college, Amanda was off defending our country and served in the military. Went to Al Nasiriyah in Iraq shortly after 9/11, did all that. So we never got to meet her. And they put us together in the wedding party thinking, oh, yeah, those two are going to get along. And get along, we really did. And look, Amanda's attractive. She's easy in the eyes, easy on the eyes. And feel free to tell me, I know. But for me, it wasn't so much. It was by no means her looks. I was with somebody else. I was already in a committed relationship. What struck me about Amanda was just the amount of things that we had in common together. Like, we had such good dynamic, like just dialogue we had. We talked about music. I was still in a band at that point. We talked about traveling, something I'm very passionate about. We just talked about living life. And I'll be honest, like, it was so innocent and plutonic. It really was. I didn't have any inklings of anything. But then shortly after that wedding, a couple of months go by. We're in the year 2014. She ends up taking a traveling nurse contract job to move to New York. And so I was the only person she knew. So she hit me up and, we just started hanging out where I realized, like, I started falling head over heels for this girl. It's quite simple. I didn't tell her where we were going to go. Now, she's also a huge sports fan. I couldn't be with anybody who wasn't. I mean, it's my entire life. If you don't like sports, don't talk to me. I've got nothing to say to you. I don't care. I surprised her with tickets to go see a Met game, but I didn't tell her. And, we hopped the 7 train from Midtown. And when she saw Citi Field, she's like, wait, are we going there? I'm like, yup. Her eyes just lit up like a Christmas tree. Like, she was so excited about it. I realized, oh, man, there's something more to be said about this girl. So, like, we kept hanging out. And obviously, eventually, one thing led to another. And, we both had significant others at the time. That obviously that imploded. And then we got together, and shortly after that, we obviously called it official, lived in New York for a little bit, moved out to California, got married, bought a home in Burbank. Here we are, 2023.
That's very cool. All right. So you guys get to Burbank. Is it the same location that you're still at?
No. So when we came out here, and it's funny how the move even happened. I was still working in the city at the time with the same firm that I had mentioned prior. I no longer work with them, so I can say it. I'm not going to tell you the firm I work for now, even though you can easily Google me. But in November of 2015, we ran the New York City Marathon together, Amanda and I. We were both fortunate enough to qualify for it, and we ran it. And as a surprise and as a gift to ourselves for all that hard work, we opted to take a trip to California. At that time, November of 15, neither of us ever visited the West Coast, at least not this far. For me, like, I've been to Vegas a bunch of times, but never LA and San Diego. So we came out here for 10 days, 5 in LA, 5 in San Diego, where my buddy Chad had an apartment right across the street from the beach over in Pacific Beach. And so I had gotten in contact with a market director at JP Morgan Chase, and we maintained a good dialogue for a matter of months. And then when I came out to LA, I hit him up. I said, hey, John, I'm in town. If you'd want to grab lunch, it'd be great to put a face to a voice. We hit it off very well. And then he asked me to come back and meet the compliance people and like the managers. And we also hit it off again really well. And by the time I got to New York, they asked me, hey, would you be interested in relocating? And I said, well, yeah, if the opportunity makes sense, I'd love to. They were like, can you come in like January 2nd? We're like right around Thanksgiving at this point. I'm like, I can't move across country in that period of time, especially during the holidays. But if you're willing to wait till February 1st, I'll be there happily. And so without knowing anything or anyone other than my buddy in San Diego, we had to scramble, Greg. Like, I did everything in terms of apartment hunting, cars. Everything was online. I Google mapped the surrounding areas that were close to work. I thought, hey, I could live in Manhattan Beach and commute to Glendale, right? No. Right. 40 miles. What's that in a car? Like, a half hour? No big deal. I didn't know anything about LA traffic. I didn't realize LA had crap for public transportation. And so I mapped everything out to Burbank. We rented a nice little 1-bedroom, very close to Warner Brothers. We stayed there for about a year and a half. And then we realized, we love Burbank. Let's just look at real estate around here. And we were fortunate in 2017 to be in a financial condition where we were able to buy a home. And we've maintained our residency in that same home since 2017. So it worked out for us. And we bought in at the right time too.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. That's really, really cool. All right. So you guys are in Burbank. You're working in finance, and
don't let the hair fool you.
And well, that's kind of where I'm going with this, is because so then you kind of reinvent yourself, didn't you? You kind of started setting yourself up like was the birth of the LAFC sort of what launched your idea to start a podcast? I mean, because they weren't even there. Did the Galaxy, the Galaxy are actually closer to you, aren't they?
No, LAFC is. The Galaxy are further south. They're closer to Long Beach. I'm closer to downtown LA.
That's right. Okay. But when you show up, does LAFC even exist?
No, LAFC was an idea at that point. The idea behind all of this was, it started out when I was in middle school. I was an athlete up until college, but I wasn't a soccer player. I was a basketball player, and I ran cross country and I ran track. And so those were my sports. I figured if I wasn't going to make it as a pro athlete, I at the very least wanted to work with them and be on the radio, be on TV. Like, that was what my heart wanted at the time. And it's funny, like I knew everything that I wanted to do as a kid. And it's funny how your paths in life converge. My freshman year, I'm looking to go. At that time, I just moved back to the States from Frankfurt, Germany. And I went to Hofstra University, which is a school that's known in that area for broadcasting and journalism. So I chose that school, close enough to home. I'd been away from my family in New York City enough. Syracuse had obviously more of a name in terms of broadcasting, but Syracuse is not as close to Queens and New York City as Hofstra was, out in Long Island, actually right next door to where the Islanders used to play at the Coliseum. And so I had a job making sandwiches, and my boss was a salty old former Navy guy, former seaman. And he told me straight up, son, unless you're a former pro athlete, and I know this is going to sound rather sexist in today's day and age, but these were his words back in 1998. He's like, son, unless you're a former pro athlete or girl who's easy on the eyes, you're never going to make it broadcasting. I brought up, well, what about Marv Albert? He goes, he was a ball boy for the Knicks, nepotism. What about Dick Vitale? The guy was a coach. He did this and that. He gave me every excuse possible as for me not to follow my passion. He told me to go into business. And as an impressionable 17, 18-year-old, I thought about it. I'm watching the NBA on NBC. Other than Ahmad Rashad, most of the people talking were former pro athletes or somebody like a Hannah Storm. So I thought this guy might have a point. Maybe I should think differently, which was a stupid thing, by the way. It's all my life for the most part, from up until the time I graduated college, up until moving out here, I always wanted to be in broadcasting or radio, Greg. I didn't know the avenue as to what to do. I was working in finance. That didn't make me happy. It still doesn't for the most part. The band didn't work out. That was my next attempt at trying to get away from finance. Then I got sucked back into it. And then coming back from my honeymoon, that's when ideas started flooding me. I had a nice 12 or so 13-hour flight coming in from Singapore back to LA, where I came across Barstool Sports. And I thought, man, these guys are everywhere. Where did they come from? Started reading about Dave Portnoy and his story about how he worked in marketing. He loves sports, created his little thing, then eventually sold it to a private equity company. I'm thinking, this guy's literally living the kind of life I want to live. This is what I want to do. I don't want to be in this finance shit. I just don't. It wasn't for me. I'm still in it, by the way. So don't show this to my boss. But I always had the desire for it. So I initially started with a little podcast thing called Couch Potato Jocks, which didn't go anywhere. Actually, it was very fruitless. But then, dejected, I still evaluating options for myself. And then when LAFC came through, I connected with my buddy J.R. Liebert. We call him the Scarf. I begged him to start a pod throughout that 2018 season. And we finally did. And then, I'll go over, I'm sure you're going to ask me about that momentarily, but I didn't get back into a sports working phase. I never was in one to begin with, but 2018, that's when things started picking up for me in the world of sports. I was 28 at the time. And yeah, that's when, wait, hold on a second. What did I say? 2018? I'm sorry. Jesus Christ. 38.
Yeah, I was going to say you weren't 28 in 2018.
No, Jesus. This is why I need to drink coffee at this hour of the night. Yeah, I didn't start until I was 38. That's when I started getting involved in sports more heavily.
Well, and so when did the Defenders of the Bank take off?
So we started it in 2018 during that inaugural season. And it just so happened the guy who I started it with, fellow Met fan, another sucker for punishment. We just had good chemistry, and he also wanted to be a broadcaster. And we started Defenders of the Bank out of a rec center in West LA. And, it started to grow because the club was new. There wasn't as much content for it. So we just kept growing and growing. And the next thing you know, we're being downloaded in 10 countries, 20 countries. We're starting to get downloads in the thousands. It's starting to pick up. The club's starting to recognize us. We're starting to walk around Bank of California Stadium and people are like, hey, that's Philly. Hey, that's the Scarf. So it started picking up relatively quickly. Fast forward now, we're, a couple episodes shy of 300 Defenders of the Bank episodes. We're sponsored by LAFC's kid sponsor, Flex Power Tools. We get paid. We're recognized. Hell, there's celebrities in LA that I see at BMO Stadium that goes, Philly, I love your pod. I'm like, yo, I grew up listening to your music. Like, this is wild. So it just kind of picked off from there. Both of us very passionate people. I think what makes our show very well is the chemistry and the dynamic we have, which I have a totally different role on Defenders of the Bank. I'm more reactionary, more off the cuff, more uncensored, unfiltered, if you will. Whereas obviously with everything I do, MASL, I take on a more professional role because of a more prestigious position to be in rather than just podcaster. But everything I've done just stemmed off of Defenders of the Bank. Everything.
Right. Well, and then how does Defenders of the Bank relate to Striking Fury when you first started that podcast? How do they relate in time?
So 2019 hits. You start to see the advertisements on social media. Landon Donovan versus Jermaine Jones. San Diego Sockers versus Ontario Fury. Toyota Arena indoor soccer. So, okay, this is interesting. So that's when like the MASL got on my radar. But truthfully, it wasn't until doing the podcast and learning more about a player like Adrian Perez. It wasn't until then that after that, that's when I started getting interested. I'm like, what is this Ontario Fury thing I keep hearing about? So we went to a game December of 2019, not that long ago. And I watched the Fury play Soles de Sonora, December of 2019. It was a great game down to the wire. Sonora ended up edging out the Fury by 1. Jermaine Jones was on that team. And remember taking photos with Nestor, and I saw Frank Tayu for the first time. But the minute I walked into Toyota Arena, Greg, like, it was that same feeling that I had seeing Shea Stadium for the first time as a 6-year-old. It was love at first sight. I was like, this is so cool. High scoring. What's a blue card? There's power plays. Like, I got really into it. So I kept following it, realized there was no content that was being made. And COVID hits, obviously 2020. That season goes on hiatus. And I ended up getting connected with the Fury. They had already knew who I was through a guy by the name of Bruce. He was an LAFC season ticket holder. He knew us from Defenders of the Bank. He's the one that brought us to the Fury games and introduced us to Liz Aguilon, who was a very instrumental part of our decision to go there. But she knew who we were, and we ended up meeting her. And at a Fury-run LAFC versus Galaxy watch party at Rowdy's, by the way, in Rancho Cucamonga, we met Nestor, and I thought, yeah, this is cool. Like, who runs your pod, guys? Like, I loved the indoor stuff. Like, this is so much fun. Who does anything for you? Well, nobody. Would you be interested? I don't ever say no to opportunities. I said, yes, let's have a conversation. So it was going to be J.R. Liebert, the Scarf, and I doing this. We had a meeting with Jimmy, with John Spire, and a couple other people were on there. I don't remember at the time who was there other than Jimmy and John. But we started Striking Fury. JR couldn't do it because he's a teacher. The scheduling, he just didn't have the bandwidth for indoor soccer. I thought this is the opportunity of a lifetime, bro. Like, we need to do this. If you're not going to do this, are you good with me focusing my efforts on this? Because I want to do this. I was gung-ho. He said, go for it. Do your thing. The beauty about Defenders of the Bank was the chemistry with JR and I. So I was a little perturbed and bummed by the fact that he couldn't join me on this journey. But I had a sports-loving wife who lives in the same house as I do that said, I'll do it. I jumped out of my chair, Greg. I'm like, wait, what? You're going to do this pod with me? And then the bells and the gears started turning. I'm like, husband and wife podcast team? Yes. This is compelling. So, cool. We started Striking Fury with Philly and the Panda because it sounds like a radio show, which is the way I like to make the pods. Yeah. And 6 weeks into it, the owner, Jeff, loved it. The head coach, Jimmy Nordberg, loved it. Everybody within the organization loved it. It's getting a few downloads here and there. Sadly, nothing compared to Defenders of the Bank. But look, MASL, MLS, LAFC, Empire Stykers, Ontario Fury at the time. There's a contrast in terms of knowledge of the sport. But they loved it. And I didn't plan this out, man. And for anybody listening to this, you'd be crazy to say no to the opportunity. They asked if I had any interest in doing broadcasting for them. I didn't hesitate. That was my dream as a child, as I alluded to earlier on. I said, absolutely. But time out. The caveat is I've never done this before. I have no broadcasting experience whatsoever. But if you give me a loose leash, I can promise you people will know who I am and they'll remember me. And I'm going to work harder than everybody else because I don't have the talent, the skills, the knowledge, none of that. But what I have is enthusiasm and passion behind my voice and a desire to learn. And so I said, look, give me the reins and I'll make you proud. And obviously those first few broadcasts were rough. There's no doubt about it. I'll tell you about the first goal call in just a second, but that's what led me essentially to all of this. It all stemmed off podcasting. I literally had zero experience doing it prior to calling that first game against the Florida Tropics during that 2021 COVID year.
Was Jonathan part of that at the time? Was he with you on that first?
Initially, no. So the idea was to hit JR back and go, bro, I get you didn't want to be on the podcast, but now we have the opportunity to literally live a life that we've wanted to live, being broadcasters. Right. He still couldn't commit to it. So at the time, you had Jose Duran and Brian Tabaget, which I have a really good relationship with Jose Duran and a good one with Brian Tabaget. I never knew them. I never assumed what would happen. But the idea was for Tabaget and I to work together on this. I don't know how they were approached or what that whole thing was about, but as we approached a week before that gauntlet of games in Ontario where there were 5 straight games at Toyota Arena, he backed out last minute. So it was just me, and there was nobody else. So I instantly thought, who's the next person? Because Panda wasn't going to do it. She didn't want to do it. She was presented the opportunity, but we just opted to make her sideline. Our vision for her was the Aaron Andrews of the MASL. That's how we still envision it. But then the one guy I know who always wanted to do this as well was Jonathan. Jonathan runs a podcast for LAFC as well called Shoulder to Shoulder. And I mean, he's got the voice for it. He's got interviewing skills. But we're both just podcasters. I asked him, bro, we get to live out a dream. We're not going to get paid anything, really, but we're going to do this. And I don't know how long it's going to last, if it's going to last. But what I do know is when life throws you an opportunity, you don't say no. You go right through that door, kicking, screaming, and doing whatever you can. Yeah. And so we got put together. I had a little more time to do my homework and learn about the Missile, and shout out to back in the day, and learn about like the league history. I did a deep dive to the history of futsal coming into indoor soccer. Like I still love to go down deep roads. I go on eBay and I buy boxes of cards from the Missile days. That's how much I love it. But Reimer comes on with me a week before. He does his homework, and neither of us have any skills on this. I just had a cocky can-do attitude. And when we called our very first game, Greg was hilarious. We were already nervous to begin with. It was a game against the Fury and the Tropics. And as we're getting ready, we're nervous just because we've never done this before. We're like, holy heck, like this is about to happen. Can we do this? 10 minutes before the broadcast, the internet in the arena, everything dies. So our producer, Mike, who you know, Mike Cepeda, he's freaking out. Yep. And that's obviously not helping out our confidence at all, man. I needed somebody to just whisper in my ear, it's going to be okay. You're going to rock it. You can do this. This is no big deal to you. Meanwhile, all I'm hearing is expletives, damn internet, this, damn internet, that. My heart's palpitating a million miles per hour. And within that opening whistle, the first few seconds of that game, Ian Bennett scores a goal. It was just like, hi, welcome to Toyota Arena. And there's a goal by number 26, Ian Bennett. Yep. And I was over the top on my goal calls. I was excited, like a puppy dog. Like I was just really excited. And I know a lot of people were like, who the hell are these guys? There was a bit of hate coming through on those initial Facebooks. But we were fortunate that it was back to back to back to back to back games, 5 games.
Right.
We had no time to dwell on whether or not this worked out. I left the first game feeling really, really awful because I'm like, I didn't know how good this was bad. I didn't feel happy about it. Right. But then I'm like, get back on your horse, Filimon. This is your opportunity. This is your destiny calling you. And so day 2, we got a little better. Day 3, we got a lot better. Day 4, day 5, a whirlwind of a difference. And here we are now about to start season 4 as the play-by-play team for the Strykers. But we literally came out of nowhere with no skill, nothing other than desire and a dream. And that's how it all started.
Well, and the chemistry between the two of you oozes across the broadcast. Both of you are, I mean, you complement each other nicely, but you aren't the same personalities. So it's really kind of fun how that works back and forth together in the conversation. And it's funny. I was telling you, I guess it was yesterday or the day before, that I'm often something of a straight man, where somebody will throw a little hint or a little caveat at me, and it just goes right over my head, and I don't even get it. But you guys do that to each other so perfectly, and each one of you reads it so beautifully. So it really comes across nicely as you guys get to go side by side throughout this endeavor, this as you say, journey.
Greg, I think it works mainly because there's a genuine love and respect for one another. I mean, we were really good friends outside of all this. We hang out together outside of all of this. And I think what's fun about us is obviously I have more of a color man personality and he has more of a play-by-play personality, but it's very unorthodox the way we do it. And it's kind of intentional, honestly, because I have a firm belief in why fit in when you were born to stand out. I like to do things that are different. I like to color my hair purple. I like to wear the outlandish outfits because honestly, watching soccer, I'm tired of dry English commentary. I'm tired of the buttoned up scenario. I want it to be off the wall. I want it to be different because at the very least, I want people to think, what color is this guy's hair going to be this time? What suit is he going to wear this time? What crazy antics and lexicon is he going to create this time? I do it because I want to drag you back in. I want to inform and educate, but more importantly, I want to entertain you, which I've often felt that in soccer, it lacks. When you hear the dry commentary from time to time, it gets boring, and I get it. But like, we don't need another buttoned up by the book English commentator. This is, indoor soccer is very much an American thing, and I want to take my idol and my passion of things. Like I want to create a Dick Vitel's my hero when it comes to this. I'm not trying to be Dick Vitale by any means, but I love his passion. His passion drew me in to college basketball commentary, like his lexicons, the diaper dandy, a PTP, all that stuff. He's the Windex man, baby. I love that. The guy literally lives a dream, and you feel it every time he talks. And if there's anything that I want to exude from my personality is the fact that I genuinely love this sport. I genuinely love this league and all aspects of it. So hate me if you will never question how committed I am and how much I love this sport.
Well, and your personality and this whole thing that you're just talking about right now, it actually plays into the game of indoor soccer. I mean, it's perfect for the sport. I mean, that's exactly the kind of personality that works well. Not necessarily shouting, not necessarily. I mean, not being loud and obnoxious into the to where your microphone gives you reverb and all this other ridiculous noise that comes off of these people shouting in their microphone. But the different, it's a perfect match. It really is a perfect match. And you guys, like I said, you guys really put it together nicely.
Thank you.
So this, I mean, you really do, and you entertain, and you really do. And it's one of those things. And it's one of those things that when the people that don't like what you're doing, what they're not liking is, in a lot of cases, and I'm guessing here. I mean, I really don't know because I enjoy it, but is that it's so different? Is it? It's wait a minute, hold on. I gotta slow this down for a minute. I gotta understand what I'm doing here, uh, and what it is. What did I just tune into? Hold on. But it's fun because even a majority of, I would imagine, those people, um, give me a broadcast and I'll win your heart kind of thing. I mean, listen to the show. Don't turn me off because you don't get it. What the heck is a Smurf? I mean, I mean the whole thing, all the nicknames and all that kind of stuff. I mean, wait a minute, just give me a broadcast and I'll win your heart. And I think that in most cases that's been the case. I know I mean I see or hear critique, but lately, I would say in the last 2 years, the critique that I've heard has been critique and not hatred. There was a period in time when you guys first started. It's like, what the heck are they doing up in Ontario? I mean, what the heck is that? But give you guys the time to put it together, and it's a following, and it's a love, and like you say, your passion is all there. And I've seen, I mean, and in fact, not only I've shared your notes, what you do prior to the games that you've put on, the pictures that you shared with us, and I've shared them back and put it out there. And I mean, I don't know what other broadcasters are doing, but if they're doing more than you, I would be shocked.
I got to show you something.
I mean, because you've taken every single player.
This right here, Greg, is years of notes from like years of calling games. I mean, something as simple as this is an Ontario Fury game board with countless pages of notes.
Right.
Here's one for the San Diego Sockers on a legal size folder. That's full. I mean, I could tell you Guerrero Pino's stats from last season.
Right.
I mean, what leading scores are. I mean, all this. And my reason for doing this mainly is out of respect for all these players. All of them have an incredible story and an incredible journey. I look at somebody like Elton de Oliveira. How does a guy go from Brazil to play in Poland, to play in Romania, where my family's from, which is how he and I connected, to all of a sudden, competing for the Tacoma Stars during 2021 and then settling on in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania? Like, that to me is a fascinating tale. And nobody was really telling the stories of all these players. Like, I do the exhaustive research because I genuinely find it fascinating. And when I hit on something that I have some kind of experience with, it makes it even more fun for me because I have some kind of frame of reference. These guys work their tails off for not a lot of money, and they deserve to get recognition, which is why I do all that stuff. I want people to know more about guys like Sebastian Mendez. I want people, look, Sockers are the elite of the elite, but how many people truly know like the story of Charlie Gonzalez, like in depth? I mean, maybe some do, maybe some don't. I can't tell you, but I want to make sure that those stories go told because I think they're fascinating. And I want them to have that respect and recognition because in my eyes, they are rock stars because they can do something I never had the ability to do so. And for everybody listening and watching our shows, I want them to all realize that these guys are rock stars too. Tremendous athletes that go very much under the radar, and I want to change the hell out of that. So, Philly, a couple of weeks back, I guess week and a half or so, I don't know exactly, but week and a half maybe, you and I were together for the LAFC game. We met up. And you were a very gracious host. It was an outstanding day. But one of the things that I noticed is while you are being this fully engaged, crazed fan in the stands for everything that's going on the field, you're simultaneously ripping through your phone, making notes of everything that you just saw happening on the field. And you're almost doing it like a chameleon because you've got one eye on your on your phone and you got one eye on the field watching the game and typing the notes at the same time.
Now, I'm assuming that was for your podcast notes. Is that correct?
That's 100% correct. I mean, you were there with us on a Wednesday. It was Wednesday or Tuesday. I forget what that night was against the Rapids. Regardless, I mean, that game gets done at like 9:30, 10-ish. Like, go to the press conference. You get to hear what Steve Cherundolo and some of the players say. By the time I get home, 11:30. I go back to watch some of the highlights to make sure that my notes are correct and that the proper player got credited on whatever assist or goal he had, and it's on the correct time frame. I don't have the time to go back and watch the game within its entirety. I want to. We're known for doing the pod immediately, and for it being out and available for everybody that listens to us for their morning commutes. So that's my way of just remembering what happens during the game. If something happened in the 67th minute, Carlos Vela, tremendous backheel pass, connecting with Denny Bouanga nutmegging it through to whoever, I don't know, whatever. I have all that. So when I see the highlights, I can confirm all that.
Right.
And we talk about it because what Defenders of the Bank is, we do a preview the night before called One More Sleep, and then we do the recap of the game along with news and notes and things of that nature. So, yeah, my time spent watching the game is watching the game and jotting down the minute of something that I think is worth discussing. And that's how I do it. That's how my co-host does it. And when we come back to the table to talk about things, I've got stuff. If he doesn't have it for a certain minute, I know I have it, so on and so forth. And at this point, I've been doing that for going on 5 years, and I enjoy paying attention and watching the game that way. I'm kind of a boring person to watch a game with, Greg, because I'm just too focused on it. I care about the game.
No, you're not. You're not boring. Are you kidding me? I mean, every time anything happened, you were high-fiving the crowds and turning on me, fist bumps, the whole thing. I mean, the last thing you are is a boring fan. It's just amazing to me because most of the people that are doing what you're doing, taking notes, are taking notes in the press box on a laptop, and they're watching the game and they're reporting on it, and they're watching the game and they're reporting on it. They're watching the game and reporting on it. And there's no, I mean, I've spent some time in some press boxes. There's none of these people are jumping up and high-fiving as soon as the goal is scored. I mean, they might be happy about it happening, but they're not spilling their coffee, because somebody just scored a goal. They're sitting there and keeping it all mellow, and you're getting the same thing done with the enthusiasm. And oh, by the way, not in the press box, sitting on your seat, which you pay for.
There's a couple of reasons for that. First and foremost, like when you are in the press box, the idea is to be objective, not to cheer. I mean, you're sort of told that. Don't cheer, don't wear the team's colors, no drinking alcohol, none of that stuff. Now, while I'm credentialed with LAFC and I have the option of sitting in the press box, I have my season tickets in Founders, right where you saw. So I do pay a fair amount of money to sit there. And when I'm there, I want to enjoy the game. I mean, I do an LAFC podcast. It's not, but I don't want to be in an environment where my team scores a goal like I can't do or say anything. It sort of defeats a lot of things for me in terms of the game day experience. I don't drink nearly as much as I once did, but if I want to have a cocktail, I don't want to have to think twice. Like I started out from nothing. Now I'm credentialed. Now I'm a professional. Now I get paid. And in some cases, I have an even bigger audience on this front than some journalists who this is their main profession. But I mean, I like doing it from my seat because I'm dead center, man. I mean, I'm right by the camera pits. What you see on TV is my view. And it's a much better vantage point than that of the press box. Plus, I've got a whole crew of people that I've known since the inaugural match in April of 2018. That's my family outside of my family. Part of what I enjoy about it is the people that are there. And you see it. People high-five me. People want to take photos with me, all that jazz. Like, I love that aspect. And I wouldn't get that in the press box.
No, absolutely not. All right. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things that have been going on and are going to be going on. Let's talk just a little bit about the King's Cup. You and I did not cross paths while both of us did do some time on the broadcast, but you were earlier in the day and I was later in the day. Oh, by the way, let me sort of throw off in a direction, because you had something that you did that day, later in the day, that is the reason why you had to take off. And it was probably, I mean, I only spoke to you briefly about it, but it was a exciting event. I know there were celebrities like crazy that were in the venue with you talking about LAFC. All kinds of people from around LA and San Diego and Southern California made the trip to go to the game. It was when Inter Miami came and played LAFC. And I know that the outcome wasn't what you wanted, but let's talk a little bit about that night.
That was a long day. I know we're going to talk about King's Cup, but Frank had asked me several months prior because he was talking about doing this tournament, which I thought was a brilliant idea. What a lot of people don't necessarily know about Frank and Uzi, for that matter, is they're very philanthropic. I mean, they're very much about giving back to the community. So a lot of the emphasis behind King's Cup was just to help inspire, to help raise money, obviously, to fix up the Y, to help inspire, kids out there that want to live their dreams and follow their life passionately. Like, he's all about inspiration. I mean, Frank's a kid who grew up in Cameroon, who found his way to the United States, played Division I soccer, West Virginia, and has had a hell of a life and a hell of a career. And he's always been about giving back. So when he asked me to do it, I said, I got you. I'm there for you. And then I realized the date, and I said, Frank, September 3rd, I do all this work with LAFC. Normally I would say, yeah, but Messi is in town. Like, I have to go do that too. And Frank was cool enough to say, whatever you can help me with, do it. So I left Burbank. I got to Ontario around 6:55, 7 a.m. I called a few games with Reimer. And I got to say, I was there for a couple hours. They probably could have utilized me a little more. I only called the first 3 games and set the table for him. But Reimer did a phenomenal job. That kid deserves all kudos and credit. He stood on his own toes for hours. And you did a phenomenal job too, my friend. I'm sure you felt the anxiety and the nerve-wracking rush of putting on those cups, knowing that there's going to be a bunch of people out there that are going to hear your voice and start either critiquing you, praising you, or ripping you apart. It's nerve-wracking. It still is nerve-wracking. But you got into it, and you freaking crushed it, by the way. So congrats to you.
Thank you.
Long story long again, because I am a long-winded guy. I had to leave the Y at 1 because I had to be at BMO by 2:30. Just because, everything we were doing with our pod and all the pregame festivities, shaking hands, kissing babies, being around things. So, we obviously did that, got into the game, watched Inter Messi whoop up on LAFC, press conference, which was hours. I was hoping, my big hope was that Messi would come into the presser. We only had Tata Martino and Sergio Busquets. And I say that only Tata Martino and Sergio Busquets. Right. But, that's huge within its own right. But did that, listen to the press conference, got home, recorded the pod, posted it on social media. 3:30 in the morning, I'm done. So my day started at 5 a.m. the day before and didn't end till almost 4 a.m. the next morning. It was almost a 24-hour day worth of work. I was gassed, but that's what the day was like. And if it wasn't for Messi, if they were playing Colorado, just say, I would have been there with Reimer the whole way through, calling out all those games. But in a lot of ways, I'm happy that Reimer did do it, because now he can't say he hasn't had experience doing the play-by-play. He has the confidence knowing he can do things. And, not that he ever wasn't, on his own 2 feet, but now, when people think of the Strikers, a lot of people often would think, just like me, for example, or Panda, Reimer would sort of be the secondary, which I hated, honestly, because we're a team. Now Reimer, without a doubt, he's his own man. And he did such a phenomenal job that I hope nobody ever views Empire as Philly, Panda, and Jonathan. It's Philly and the Doctor, Philly and the Doctor, Philly, the Doctor, and Panda. I don't ever want it to be to the point where anyone's an afterthought. And I'm just so stinking proud of him, man. I love the guy like a brother. He crushed it. And I'm so proud of him. But anyway, that was the day.
Well, and I had a really good time working with him. I had a great time just hanging out with him too, talking off the air too, and getting to know him better and strengthening that bond and relationship too. But what an exciting day it was. We had standing room only, lots of interaction. This is the thing. This is the only real point I want to make to the people that didn't go, that could have gone and didn't go, or even that could have made a choice to travel and go that didn't go. And that is that I'm not sure I've ever been to an event where that many people, players that were competing over such a long period of time that you had, as a fan, direct access to when they were not playing. I mean, so many. I mean, it's the indoor game is already that kind of a game where, you know, the access to the players is far better than it is in most any other sport. But that particular event placed the fans and the players in the same areas, and everybody was talking to everybody, and everybody was shaking everybody's hands, and the other thing I want to say, and this I don't know if this will piss anybody off or not, really don't care, but it was,
you should never care.
Right. It was cool also to see that there was almost no autographed hounds. It would have been the perfect place for someone to run in there with, you know, a bag of shirts and wanting to start getting autographs. Not to say that it didn't happen, but there was nobody that's what they were there for. And it would have been the perfect opportunity for someone to do that. But it was better, of course, when you're not handing autographs, when you're just talking to people, you're getting to know people. It's not a matter of I can prove, look at my jersey, I can prove that I met this guy because I got his name on my jersey. That's not what relationship is. You know, sitting down about after the game and, you know, talking for even just 10 minutes with Nick Pereira after he carried his team on his back, you know, is a great opportunity, you know, just to you know, brush elbows with some of the people that we watch and admire and are, like you say, rock stars. There is a story, I think I might have shared this. I did share this with you. A story about Craig Childs and his kids. Using the word rock star always brings this memory to my mind. You happen to be both a superstar and a rock star, which I think is really interesting. But
I wouldn't say that, but thank you.
But I did. But it was interesting. So one night at a San Diego Sockers game, I was sitting next to Craig Childs' mom and dad in the stands, and both of his, I think two of his girls were, his daughters were sitting there also. And I had a chance to just sort of interact with one of the girls briefly. And I leaned into her and I said, you know, your dad's a rock star. And she sort of giggles at me and sort of leans in back at me again. And she says, no, he's not. He's a superstar.
That's awesome.
I thought that was really, really cool. So let's get to the reason now. Anybody that's been watching the last hour and 2 minutes would have no idea that the main purpose of this conversation and getting together with you tonight is to talk to and promote, well, a little bit, you know, hey, let's get to know who Philly is. And that's really what I like doing. And I think we've done that. Thank you for that. But I want to talk about and promote what's coming up in a couple of days up in Ontario at the Toyota Arena.
Yeah, we're very excited to do yet another USA versus Mexico friendly. But this time it has a different twist to it. You buy the ticket for the game and you get a 2-for-1. You get an international friendly USA versus Mexico girls game, which is really, really cool. Going to be a lot of very talented girls on the turf. And then you stick around, and then you're going to have the men's game at 5:00 with a very talented roster on both sides of the turf. So that's what we're going to be doing September 10th from Toyota Arena. And obviously, if you're spread out across the country and can't make it out to Southern California, from what I've been told, it'll be on the MASL's Twitch channel and a few other mediums, but that's the main one in which we're all accustomed to for that matter. And so that's going to be going on, as well as a cornhole tournament. So, Greg, I don't know if you knew this, even though you've got media credentials. I don't know if it's still too late, but you sign up for a cornhole tournament. It starts earlier in the morning, and the two finalists are going to compete at halftime of the USA-Mexico men's game. And the winner's going to walk out with $5,000. So that's going to be something that we're going to be keeping an eye on throughout the course of both games broadcast. So that'll be a fun thing. But the girls' game is going to feature some really talented players. You got the likes of Lauren Sesselman, who also competed in that King's Cup tournament. Here's a girl who had a phenomenal career at Purdue University. She's a Boilermaker alum and a Hall of Famer. They just recognized her in the Purdue Athletics Hall of Fame, which, look, Purdue's a Big Ten university with a lot of tremendous talent going through it. She gets recognized. That's a big deal. She played over a decade of professional soccer. And I would say one of her bigger accolades is the fact that she won a bronze medal in the Olympics playing with Canada because she has dual citizenship. This is a girl that's phenomenally talented and gifted, and one that would still be killing it in the NWSL if she decided to go down that route. She's going to be an exciting player to watch on the USA side. You got another girl by the name of Christine Kwan, who's represented the United States national women's futsal team. And she does a lot of tech ball as well. She's going to be really exciting to watch. On the women's side, you've got the likes of Johanna Rosas, who plays down in Liga MX Femenil for Xolos in Tijuana. So you're going to see a lot of really talented girls on that side of it. You have former pros, collegiate athletes, people that are playing in the WPSL. So that's going to be a real fun one. And that's the 1 o'clock game. 5 o'clock, you've got a very talented USA side competing against a very talented Mexican side. And all these players that are competing in it, for the most part, all MASL, with the exception of one gentleman by the name of Randy Martinez. He's going to be playing for the United States. But the reason he even made the roster is he impressed the coaching staff for the Empire Stykers at their first tryout. So the player that was most impressive gets an opportunity to wear. Obviously, the Strikers are putting this on, so you're going to have that there. He's going to get to wear the red, white, and blue and compete in this game, and we'll see where his career goes from here, whether or not he becomes a part of the Empire Strikers full-time or not. Either way, he's got an outstanding opportunity to play in the Major Arena Soccer League against some highly talented players. So there are a lot of compelling storylines. I mean, that game last year, if you remember, 8-7, it was back and forth. If you thought, Mexico was going to run away with it when they were up 3-0, the USA comes back, scores 4 more. And then it's one team up, then another team ties, one team up, the other team ties. Finally ends 8-7. Great game. They go down to Chihuahua for a doubleheader. The USA wins for the first time on Mexican soil. And then, they get routed 11-5 the next time. But, it's going to be exciting, man. I can't wait. Can't wait to call indoor soccer again in the booth with Jonathan Reimer. And we're going to have a couple of special guests all throughout the broadcast. I'm not going to tell you who it is, but people that represent the indoor game at a high level and people that represent the outdoor game at a high level as well. So stay tuned for that.
Well, one of the storylines, and forgive me because I don't know who the coach is for the women's Mexican team on Sunday. But I know
Chuy Molina.
No, isn't he the men's coach?
No, Everardo Sanchez.
Oh, very good. Okay, very good. That was yes. So okay. So that's the ones I wanted to mention was Chuy Molina and Paul Dougherty and Paul Wright are 3 guys that absolutely I know these guys.
Yeah.
And how exciting it is to have such a great, and also the Mexican coach also. I mean, these guys are. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun to watch. It's going to be fun to go up there and be a part of that.
I mean, there's going to be people on watching the stream wondering where a lot of the San Diego Sockers players are, and I would too. I mean, they have some of the most talented players in the Major Arena Soccer League. Period. Love to see the likes of some Guerrero Pino and some Christian Gutierrez, Brandon Escoto, Craig Childs. I'd love to see those guys, but they're not going to be there, unfortunately. But there is representation on the coaching side. Obviously, you mentioned the Pauls. Those guys were playing for the Sockers in the heyday. So you can't tell me that there is no San Diego Sockers representation. Paul, I mean, that guy's club career begins, Daughtry, he begins at Wolverhampton, which is a team that now plays in the Premier League. So he had quite the outdoor career. Obviously, he did his thing in San Diego, a legendary player in the Missile. And same with Paul Wright. Guy's got his name hanging from the rafters at Pechanga Arena, soon to be the, First Credit, right? First Credit Wave or something like that. I forget the name of the new arena, but regardless, his name is still going to be in the rafters anyway.
Wavefront, I believe.
Wavefront. Where did I think first credit? It doesn't matter. I mean, it's going to be a beautiful arena. It's revolutionary what y'all are doing, moving up to Oceanside. I love it. It's going to be a shorter commute for me as well. But you got those two guys at the helm, two very well-respected players in the history of indoor soccer, and it's going to be a joy getting to see both Pauls do their thing on the coaching front.
Well, and it's also going to be fun too, from the standpoint of the Empire fans, because they're going to get a sort of a preview of Paul Wright, who's going to be their head coach at Empire, on the bench, working his wares as a coach. I think if there's been any hesitation at all in any kind of conversation about that signing, it's just been that he doesn't have coaching experience. But personally, I think we'll find out. But I mean, personally, I think it's going to be a moot point, because the guy has such a legendary, pedigree within indoor soccer, and knows it throughout so many years, playing with so many, superstars along the way, learning the craft, in fact, from some of the major stars that played back in the day when he was just a young kid coming on, and then all the way through the whole thing, went full circle, because then there he was in his final years as a player, putting the younger players under his wings and teaching them what all the ropes. So it's going to be fun to see him coaching.
Yeah, him and I have already sat down, hung out, chatted about the season and everything. And the way to shut up the critics is to succeed. And Paul Wright has succeeded in every which way, shape, or form of activity he's participated in. Obviously, his indoor career is highly decorated. Played for the Kansas City Wizards. I mean, he did speed work with a lot of the players on the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, you've seen the guy recently. Dude's yoked. He's still built out of rock. You could put a jersey on him and sweat and let him play, and I think he's still going to break ankles, break hearts, and set trends. The guy can still do his thing. And if anything, obviously, he has a depth of experience, played with some of the best, managed and coached by some of the best, and this is an opportunity for him to excel. And obviously, there was a time we needed a change as the powers that be saw fit, and I think we have a person that the players are going to look up to and respect tremendously. They can't say, "Oh, you've never played before. Oh, you don't know indoor game."
That's right.
He'll shut all of them up within seconds of touching the ball, and I think that's a very important factor to have right now.
In fact, he was sitting right next to me while we were up at the Kings Cup and we were on air, and he was on the table right to my immediate right, and he sat there throughout a lot of our broadcasts, a lot of the tournament. The red card, I don't know if you followed the end of any of the last few games of the tournament at all, but there was
I did not.
Yeah, there was a red card during one of the semifinal game matches, and we pulled Paul onto the broadcast. We gave him the third headphones and put him in and had him talk a little bit about what he thought just happened. Reimer and I were, speculating back and forth as to, looking at the replays and stuff like that and what we thought about it. And Paul came in and we were kind of bouncing back and forth, and Paul came in and it was very on point. It's like, no, are you kidding me? That was a blatant red card. I mean, there was no hesitation in his mind. And the other thing is, I had a brief conversation with him. One of the things that sort of interested me, and it's certainly nobody's business until it's made their business, is, I'm really interested to see who his staff is going to be. I'm really excited to find out who he's going to bring in on and put in as his assistant coach and his goalkeeper coach, and who he's going to have on his staff. And I asked him about it, and I can honestly tell you that he told me he can't tell me. he get right.
I'm not breaking any news here. I've got an idea, but I'm not breaking that news.
That's right. And it wasn't a matter of, I mean, oftentimes when I talk to people, it's a matter of, hey, listen, I'll tell you about it, but you can't say nothing. And no, that's not what happened here. It was, I can honestly tell you that I can't honestly tell you.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to share with you, but the last thing I'm trying to do is get coach on my bad side, or to get on coach's bad side. So long season hasn't even started yet.
If I tell you, I got to kill you.
Yeah, pretty much. Or I'm going to get killed myself.
Right. Oh man, Philly, what a great time. It's been about an hour and 15 minutes, and I really appreciate you coming on with me. This is exactly the kind of conversation that I look forward to and anticipated. Thanks for opening up your story and letting people know who you are and what you are and where you came from and how you got to where you're at right now. One of the things that you emphasized to me when we were sitting together at the LAFC game was you kind of leaned into me and you said, Suddy, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And you said it with such enthusiasm that it really impressed upon me the depth and sincerity of that. And that just goes to so much respect and really kind of I'm just kind of anxious to sort of watch where it goes, man. What happens with this that you've now gotten your foot into and people are paying attention to you and I obviously I see you in the MASL circles and people know who you are, but I also had the opportunity to experience you in the MLS circles and that people also know who you are and how much that kind of thing is something that you can and I expect will just move forward with and just keep grabbing at that gold ring, man.
I mean, that's the plan. I mean, I'm so humbled and honored by everything that I've accomplished. But I can tell you, I've worked my tail off. I mean, I can say things like I've spoken about LAFC on ESPN, on BBC when Gareth Bale came in. My face on those electronic billboards at Bank of California Stadium, I was on all last year because of 110 football. You could drive by BMO Stadium at 11 a.m. and you'd see my wild and crazy mug on that billboard. Like I've worked my tail off to do these things, but I have yet to begin or scratch the surface as to what my ultimate goal is. Until y'all regularly see my face and hear my voice, until I can call the likes of a Taylor Twellman a colleague, or I get to be doing things within Champions League, like I'm just going to grind it out until it happens. And honestly, as much as I love soccer, it doesn't matter if it's soccer, professional wrestling, or anything else. Like that's where I want to be. The idea of spending another 20, 30 years in finance, I'd rather jump off of a bridge. But the idea of doing 20 or 30 more years, I want, in a way, I'll never compare myself to this human being, but somebody like a Vince Scully, basically doing it his entire life up until he realized he couldn't do it anymore. That's how I want to live out the remainder of my years. Calling games, being on the radio, doing broadcasts, doing whatever I can to help make this sport grow, to help make soccer indoor and outdoor grow within this country, and just to be a small part of that. I want to affect people's lives in the most positive way I can, and to be an example of, you know what, you don't need the schooling for it. You don't necessarily need to have the connections for it. You just need to work your tail off and do the right things. And eventually you'll get noticed. I'm here because of Liz and John Spire. Those two recognized something in me. They saw something in me that I didn't even know I have. And I love those two dearly. They're the reason why I'm here. But obviously, like, that wouldn't have come into fruition unless I was doing all the other things, working till 3, 4 in the morning for free, recording a podcast in a rec center. I put in time, and by no means have I put in all the time, but I'm going to continue to put in the time until, I accomplish what it is that I want, because life is meant to be enjoyed doing the things you want. I view, this is going off on a tangent. Sorry about that. But we all have a story to tell. We're all the authors of our own novels. And if chapters 23 through 47 all entailed, he went to work, he worked out, he went to happy hour, and that's it, that's a freaking boring story. I don't have that, because I've been very cognizant to make my life as much fun as I possibly can and to pursue the things that I am the most passionate about, because I don't know what my time here is. I learned on September 11th, being in New York City, that we don't have a guaranteed set time in life. That day taught me to go out there and grab what you want and squeeze and grind it out until you make it. And I haven't made it yet. No way have I. But I'm getting somewhere with it, and I hope to continue to do it. And if I can inspire just one person to go out there and pursue their passions and to leave the drudgery of the cubicle farm behind, then I've made my impact on this world. I aim to educate, inform, and entertain. And I don't mean that just for the broadcast. I mean that period. That's my purpose. That's my goal in life is to add joy and a smile to somebody's face and educate them on some things and to teach them about fun things, not necessarily rules, but the history of a player or a team or something.
Right. Well, thank you very much for joining me, because those are the perfect exiting words from coming from Christian Filimon. Thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate our friendship and getting to know you. And I really do. Also, I wouldn't forgive myself if I didn't tell you to give Panda a hug for me before the end of the day. The two of you guys are amazing. I love you both. And thanks.
Love you too, buddy.
Thanks again for joining me. And I'll see you on Sunday.
See you Sunday, man. Enjoy your next couple of nights of sleep. Let's have some fun on Sunday.
All right. Thanks, buddy.
Thank you.